It's incredibly rare for murder defendants to take the stand. It's a risk very few take. At stake, their freedom or even their lives.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do, sir.
You may take your seat.
This is Charlie Adelson, a successful periodontist accused of plotting the murder of his sister's ex-husband.
Did you cause the death of Professor Dan Markel?
Absolutely no.
Will Adelson be able to persuade the jury that he had nothing to do with the murder and is actually being extorted by Markel's killers?
She's like, look, if you don't pay in 48 hours, they will kill you.
Or will newly enhanced FBI audio convince them Adelson was the conniving mastermind?
Dr. Adelson on this recording is the real Dr. Adelson.
So police show up and there's gang members. They're not going to come down too hard on me.
Who are they going to believe, right? An oral surgeon or a gangster?
Take a courtside seat with the victim's attorney, the legal analysts, and the lawyer who literally wrote the book on this case.
The members of the jury are being confronted with two diametrically opposed views, all of which results in the same thing: money in the hands of the killers. Which one are you going to believe?
I'm Dan Abrams, and this is Taking the Stand.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear?
I'm being honest with everything I say to you.
Do solemnly swear
the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
I would like to testify.
The testimony you are about to give, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
So help you God.
This is a story about an amazing father who was killed and deprived of the opportunity to provide an unlimited amount of love to his children.
It's just can't understand it.
The reason that we're here today is because the defendant in this case, Charlie Adelson, hired a hitman to kill his former brother-in-law, Dan Markel.
I wasn't part of his murder at all. You have it wrong.
Charlie Adelson faces charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation of murder for the 2014 death of Florida State University law professor Dan Markel. The state alleges that Charlie paid his then-girlfriend and two hitmen to murder his former brother-in-law, all in an effort to help his sister Wendy gain sole custody of their two children. Prosecutors also claim Charlie's mother, Donna Adelson, encouraged Charlie to intervene and help find a solution to Wendy's custody issues.
The prosecution alleged that Donna Adelson was in Charlie's ear enough. Charlie basically told his mom, okay, I know exactly how to take care of this.
While the two hitmen, Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera, as well as Adelson's ex-girlfriend, Katie Magbanua, are all arrested in 2016, Charlie's never charged. That is, until 2022, when enhanced audio from a 2016 FBI sting is finally made available to the state.
If they had any evidence, it would have already happened under court.
Does an innocent person say if they had any evidence?
But the defense says the FBI recordings don't tell the whole story. They claim that Charlie's a victim too. They admit he paid the trio, but only after Markel's death in order to protect Charlie's family. The defense maintains the killers carried out the murder on their own, thinking they could then extort the wealthy oral surgeon.
These people only know part of the story.
You will learn that Charlie Adelson was told if he didn't pay within the next 48 hours, he or one of his family members would be next. Does that sound like a murder for hire? Or does that sound like extortion?
If convicted, Charlie Adelson could spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Tragically, on July 18th of 2014, Dan Markell was shot twice in the head in broad daylight in the driveway of his home. The last day of Dan Markell's life that day began like any other. He drove his 2 little boys to preschool, and then he drove over to the gym to work out. After finishing his workout, he pulled in his driveway. Moments later, Dan Markell's neighbor heard a gunshot.
911, what's your emergency?
He didn't send an ambulance in a hurry. He's still alive. He's moving.
We heard a noise, a loud bang. As I looked out, I saw a car quickly back up out of the driveway. Looked like a silver or white colored Prius.
The police pulled surveillance video from the parking lot of Dan's gym, and they saw Dan's car being followed by this Prius. Then later, the police came up with the brilliant idea of pulling all the city bus video footage from around Tallahassee that day. And lo and behold, they did see a Prius with 2 men in it.
On the front windshield is a SunPass. SunPass transponders are used to pay for going on toll roads.
Ultimately, they discovered that that Prius was rented in Miami, Florida, and the paperwork from that rental literally had the name of Luis Rivera.
They got Luis Rivera's bank records and surveillance video from the drive-through of his bank. This was the first time that law enforcement got a really good look at Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera.
Phone records reveal that one of Sigfredo Garcia's most frequent contacts was a woman named Catherine Magbanua. Her nickname is Katie. Garcia and Magbanua have a long history of an on-again, off-again relationship, and they actually share 2 kids in common. Catherine Magbanua is also one of the most frequent contacts of this defendant, Charlie Adelson. She was his girlfriend at the time.
For their roles in the murder of Dan Markell, Magbanua and Garcia were convicted of first-degree murder and are serving life sentences. Luis Rivera pled guilty to second-degree murder and got 19 years after cooperating with the state.
So am I correct that Katie hired Garcia and Garcia hired you?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and did she get the money?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know where she got the money from?
Yeah, the dentist.
The dentist?
Like Wendy and her brother.
Did you kill him and then try to get Katie to blackmail the dentist?
No.
Well, the dentist's lawyers have indicated that you and Garcia got this idea on your own to come to Tallahassee and kill the professor. Is that true?
No. Not a good one.
I know your purpose was money,
Yeah.
but whoever did the hiring had a different purpose, right?
Yes.
To get these kids.
Get the kids back.
You were a member of the Latin Kings, right?
Yeah.
And that's a crime family, right?
It's a family, yeah.
You were supposed to be paid $35,000.
Yes.
Sigfredo Garcia, the shooter, gave you an extra $2,000, right?
Yes.
Sigfredo never told you that he and Katie were getting paid every month after the murder, right?
Never knew nothing about that.
You didn't know that Katie was getting money from Charlie Adelson every month in an extortion plot, did you?
No.
Isn't it possible that they lied to you about the purpose of the job to begin with?
Yes.
Isn't it possible that you thought it was a murder for hire, but it was really an extortion?
I don't know.
As of April of 2016, law enforcement and prosecutors are stuck. They've got Garcia and they've got Rivera. They know what they did. They're pretty certain why they did it, but they don't have enough evidence to pull the trigger on prosecuting any member of the Adelson family.
Suspecting that the Adelsons are involved in the murder of Dan Markel over a child custody dispute, the FBI stages what is known as a bump. In April of 2016, they orchestrate an encounter between Donna and an undercover FBI agent pretending to be an associate of Luis Rivera.
The bump was on April 19th, 2016?
Correct.
Why did you select Donna Adelson to be the recipient of this bump?
Because we noticed the pattern of calls leading up to the murder. The calls were always Donna Adelson to Charlie Adelson to Catherine Magbanua to Sigfredo Garcia and then back.
Excuse me, Mrs. Adelson? How you doing? Just want to give you this. Listen. Good, don't be scared.
He handed her an article about the anniversary of Dan Markel's murder, and it had the number $5,000 and a phone number scribbled onto it.
Well, this will explain it. Thank you.
And who is the first person that Donna Adelson calls after this bump?
Charlie Adelson.
Does it involve me or other people?
Well, probably the two of them. You probably have a general idea what I'm talking about.
One would think that Donna Adelson would say, some man came up to me and he's demanding money from us. She never says any of that.
So as soon as Charlie hangs up with his mother, the first person he calls is Katie, and he says, I gotta tell you what just happened to my mother.
Charlie then asks Katie to meet him at a restaurant called Dolce Vita. The FBI records this encounter as well, but background noise makes it mostly inaudible. And the state simply does not have enough evidence to charge him. That would all change in 2022, when a former CIA operative hired by the state was able to enhance the audio, giving them enough to arrest Charlie Adelson.
That recording includes statements of Charles Adelson, which can be heard now for the first time.
How do you get people to talk? You go to smoke grenades, and then you get all the cockroaches to run out.
While the prosecution believes the recordings implicate Charlie, they still need to explain to the jury how the child custody dispute led to murder. A year before Markel's murder, Wendy Adelson had lost a legal effort to move her two sons from Tallahassee to Miami, where her mother Donna lived. Charlie, the state alleges, hired Garcia and Rivera to murder Markel, clearing the path for Wendy and Donna to get what they desperately wanted, the boys in South Florida permanently.
Donna Adelson wanted her grandchildren in Miami with her. She made it clear in her communications with Wendy that that was the #1 issue.
Did you come into possession of some emails that were exchanged between Wendy Adelson and Donna Adelson?
We did.
Anything in those emails that goes to motive in your investigation?
Donna Adelson. She was being very assertive.
And was there mention in those emails of a bribe that was to be offered to Dan Markel to potentially facilitate this relocation?
There was.
The most significant scheme that Donna came up with to try and get Dan to agree to relocation was offering Dan $1 million.
And who was going to pay for the bribe?
There was going to be a three-way payment between Donna and Harvey Adelson. We're going to pay 33% of it. Charlie Adelson would pay 33%, and then Wendy would pay the other 33%.
Things started heating up when Dan filed a motion that accused Donna Adelson of essentially alienating his kids away from him.
Could you read that, please?
The children informed Mr. Markel, Dad, Grandma says you're stupid. When queried as to why Grandma would say such things, the children replied jointly that it is because she says you are trying to take her sunshines away from her.
Mr. Markell is concerned that continued exposure to such negativity forms a foundation for parental alienation. Is that what he was alleging about your mom?
That is what he is alleging in this document.
Dan wanted the court to order that any visitation she had with his sons, any access to them, would be supervised.
Is it fair to say your mom was worried about this motion?
No, my mom never knew about this motion.
Well, you forwarded this motion to your mother.
I don't believe
via
I did.
Email. In fact, you forwarded this motion to 12 different people. So if I just send it to all these people?
I couldn't really say. It's been a long time.
I want to direct your attention to your law enforcement interview on the day of the murder.
God, everyone's sorry this is happening. You know, it's like my parents have more reason to dislike Danny than almost anyone else. He hurt their daughter.
That is what I said.
And that's because he hurt you, right?
I was saying that in the context of talking to law enforcement for hours and hours and trying to help them figure out who might be responsible.
Your family had your ex-husband killed to try to help you, didn't they?
No, that's completely untrue.
Did your brother ever mention hiring a hitman to kill Dan Markell?
No.
My brother, his name's Charlie, the one I'm really close to, he makes a lot of jokes in bad taste, and it was always his joke that, like, he knew Danny treated me badly, and it was always his joke. He said, I looked into hiring a hitman, and it was cheaper to get you this TV, so instead I got you this TV. My brother, his name's Charlie, he said, I looked into hiring a hitman and it was cheaper to get you this TV, so instead I got you this TV.
Is that what he said?
That was a joke that he made, yes.
And hiring the hitman, that was to kill Dan Markell, right?
That was the joke.
After the prosecution confronts Wendy Adelson with a seemingly incriminating joke made by her brother Charlie, his lawyers look to reframe the issue.
Now, Charlie made that joke many times, right?
He did.
He never told you he actually looked into hiring a hitman, right?
No.
Did you think he was serious?
No.
Wendy is a good witness for the defense because she doesn't believe her brother did this. She doesn't believe he has a motive to have done this.
The defense theory was it wasn't a murder for hire. It was actually an extortion. And Charlie wasn't the perpetrator, he was actually a victim.
So the only way to get this story in a meaningful way in front of the jury is to put Charlie on the stand.
How do you feel right now?
I'm really nervous.
Why are you nervous?
My whole life depends on it.
By the time frame of 2014, when Professor Markell was murdered, how many offices were you working in? Approximately.
Between 30 and 35 offices.
And what did your income look like in the 2014 range?
14, I made between, I think, around 850 to 900,000.
To the defense, Charlie Adelson is a guy who's extremely focused on his career, on the business that he's developed very successfully. He didn't want to throw that away.
Let's talk about the Adelson Institute. During the 2014 timeframe when you owned the office, did your mom control the books?
She wrote the checks.
How involved was your mom in your life?
Business-wise, very involved because she was running the office.
I want to talk a little bit about your sister, Wendy. How involved were you with the divorce proceedings?
I wasn't really involved with the divorce proceedings. I would definitely hear stories. I would say probably 20% came from Wendy and 80% came from my mom.
The defense is going to point out that the prosecution is missing in this case Charlie's actual connection to this much hatred for the victim. A lot of the conversations that you hear throughout the evidence in this case don't really show him with a vested interest in this divorce or in this child custody.
How did you first meet Catherine Magbanua?
I met Katie in the summer of 2013. She started working the front desk of a dental office that I worked at.
Now, I want to talk about the $1 million offer. Did you ever become aware of efforts by your family, including yourself,
yes,
to offer Professor Markel money to allow your sister to relocate?
I did, yes.
And did you ever talk with Catherine Magbanua about that $1 million offer?
Yes, I did.
How did she respond?
She was like, wow, that's a lot of money. She's like, you got to take out a loan for that? And I said, no, I got cash, I can pay for it.
Charlie and Rashbaum wanted the jury to conclude that that's when this idea started rolling around in Katie's mind. Boy, there's something there that I can get Sigfredo to start working on. Maybe we can get that money.
This $1 million offer, which the prosecution was trying to use to show how intensely the Adelsons felt about relocation, is now being used by the defense to show this motive for the extortion plot.
Now we're on July 18th, when Professor Markel was murdered. Did you speak with Catherine Magbanua?
Yes, I did.
What happened when she arrived?
When she arrived to my house, she just looked panicked and upset. She said, listen, this is all my fault, but I had no idea anything was going to happen. I spoke in too much detail about your family's personal problems, about your sister, Dan Markel, and the $1 million offer.
What did you say?
I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, my friend killed Dan, and he wants to be paid $250,000.
What happened next?
I started cursing it. I'm like, who did this? Who's your friend that did this? And she's like, I don't want to say. I can't say. And I was like, was it Sigfredo? And she's like, no, I'm not telling you. And I'm like, Katie, I'm not going to be part of paying for a murder. This is insane. And she's like, look, if you don't pay in 48 hours, they will kill you. And I said, Katie, I feel like I'm getting extorted now.
What did you do then?
I said, Katie, I don't have $250,000 in cash. And she's like, well, you have a ton of money in your safe. And I said, Katie, I don't have that much in my safe. I do have a lot. And I walked over to my safe. I opened it up, and I said, go ahead and count. That's not $250,000.
How much money did she count?
$138,000.
What did she do with $138,000?
She put it in her purse, and she asked me, she goes, how can you get the rest? And I'm like, hey, that's all the cash I've saved up from forever.
What happened next?
She said, well, can you pay like $3,000 a month? And I said, yeah, I can do that.
Did she tell you anything in particular before she left the house?
She told me, whatever you do, she said, please don't tell anybody about what happened.
Over the next 2 years, Charlie says he paid Katie $3,000 every month. And he also kept his word that he wouldn't tell anybody about the extortion.
But he made one exception to that, and that was his mom, Donna Adelson.
Once Charlie is making these payments via the payroll of the Adelson Institute to Katie, that sets a red flag off for Donna, because Donna is in charge of the payroll. So she starts asking, why are we writing your girlfriend these checks? What is she doing for the business?
And it was at that point that Charlie decided, you know what, I really should tell someone, because in case I get killed, at least they'll know why and what had happened to me. So he confided only in his mom.
And what did you tell your mom?
I told her that the night of the 18th, I got extorted for $250,000.
How did your mom react?
She wanted to go to the police. And
And what did you tell her?
I said, absolutely not. It's not going to bring Dan back. I go, you're just going to end up getting me killed, or they'll come after somebody in the family.
I think if they thought I had permission, they would find me and they'd help.
You're aware Dolce Vita is, according to the state, the final straw that led to your arrest, right?
Yeah.
There were a lot of wiretaps going on in April of 2016, but there was one meeting that was surveilled at a restaurant called Dolce Vita, where you actually had two FBI agents that had cameras in little bags that were facing Katie Magbanua and Charlie Adelson at a table. And they were talking about the bump.
I wish it wasn't complicated. Why did they I think if they thought I had permission, they would find me and they'd help.
As you're talking about this, what are the both of you trying to figure out?
We're trying to figure out, is this real extortion or is this the police?
By Charlie's direct examination, you've got two different extortion plots. You've got the one that started the day of Dan Markel's murder and one that started the day of the bump.
They don't, people only know part of the story, and they think they know part of it.
What are you telling Katie here?
I'm saying they didn't mention my name. They don't even know I was extorted, and that they only know part of the story. They know about the checks that my mom was writing to you. They don't realize that that was payment for an extortion, not payment for a murder.
And by the way, isn't that exactly what the bump is?
The bump is an extortion.
Why do you bring up a gang member?
Because Katie told me that Luis Rivera was the head of the Latin Kings, and that's who the second extortion was, a Latin King gang member.
Now, when Katie is telling you that he's the head of the Latin Kings, what starts going through your mind?
This is real. Like this is real extortion, and it's happening again.
If they're being extorted by the Latin Kings, it's almost infinite the amount of fear one could have in a circumstance like that.
And why didn't you go to the police?
I thought if I went to the police that they'd kill me.
His double extortion theory gave him a way to respond to every piece of evidence.
Do you love your nephews?
Of course.
Would you ever take their father away from them?
No, never. Never in a million years.
He seemed to be forthright and somewhat sympathetic. I was very worried that we were going to get a mistrial or even an acquittal.
While Charlie did well explaining his double extortion defense, he'll face a tougher challenge under the state's cross-examination. The prosecutor has been preparing for this moment for close to a decade.
This was a major moment. The longtime prosecutor of the murderers of Dan Markel going up against the maestro himself.
Have you ever heard the saying that the simplest explanation is always the most likely? Have you heard that?
I've heard that theory before, yeah.
Was your explanation to the jury over the last little over a day the simplest explanation?
It was the truth.
For the prosecution, the simplest explanation is you and your mother arranged for the murder of Dan Markel. And this other explanation, this extortion theory, is complicated and convoluted and therefore does not make any sense.
Why did Garcia and Rivera need to kill someone to extort you?
You gotta ask them.
Well, why couldn't they just come put a gun to your head and say, give me all the money in your safe?
Thank God they didn't.
She asks Charlie, does this make sense? Why would these guys commit a murder and then extort you if they could just threaten you directly?
The prosecution also highlights Charlie's attitude and bravado during the 41-minute Dolce Vita recording.
To the prosecution, Charlie Adelson is a guy that's always in control, not the guy cowering in fear when a girlfriend tells him he's being extorted.
Someone comes up to me, they're getting ready to shoot, something to shoot. When the police show up, and there's a doctor, there's an oral surgeon standing there with a dead gay member of the driveway, they're not going to come down too hard on me.
To Georgia Kappelman, the real Charlie Adelson was the guy captured in that moment at Dolce Vita.
Do you think you can talk your way out of this?
No, I don't. I'm not part of a murder.
Who are they going to believe, right? An oral surgeon or a gangster? Did Catherine Magbanua put you on a payment plan with the Latin Kings?
She asked me if I could pay $3,000 a month in 2014, and I said, yes, I can.
Do extortionists send a girlfriend of their victim to collect their extortion money? Is that the way it's done, doctor?
I'm telling you what happened to me.
According to Charlie, he kept up what he said were extortion payments to Magbanua until she and the hitmen were arrested in 2016, but never went to the police because he feared for his life.
So Katie is arrested October of 2016. She doesn't stand trial for another 3 years. And during the entirety of those 3 years, according to Charlie's own testimony, he believes she's innocent and that she was just being used as a go-between between the killers and him.
So for 3 years, she was in the Leon County Jail, awaiting trial, yes?
She was there.
And you believed she was innocent.
Yes.
And you had this whole explanation to assist with exonerating her, right?
I have the truth of what happened, yes.
But you didn't offer the truth of what happened, did you?
Nobody came to me. I thought the truth would come out.
Does someone have to come to you?
I was told not to talk to Katie and not to talk to anybody about this case by counsel.
He never did anything to help her out. After all, she was somebody he was trying to keep very close because she was protecting him. So the notion that he wouldn't try to help her in the greatest need in her life that she had, it just didn't square.
Katie Magbanua was tried twice. Her first trial in 2019 ended with a hung jury. Her second in 2022 with a conviction. She received a life sentence without parole. In both cases, she testified and denied having any role in the murder plot. Now she's testifying again in Charlie Adelson's trial and telling a very different story.
Ma'am, please say your name.
Catherine Magbanua.
I see that you're in jail clothes. Are you currently in custody?
Yes, ma'am.
What are you in custody for?
Murder.
This is the third time that Katie Magbanua has testified in the Dan Markel case, and there's a lot of anticipation here because for the first time in the case, she is testifying on behalf of the prosecution.
Who came up with the idea to kill Dan Markel?
Charlie.
What was your motivation for becoming a part of this murder plot?
Financially.
On the night of the murder, did you go to the defendant's house?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Were you in a panic when you arrived at his house?
I wasn't in a panic, but Charlie was. When I opened the door, he was kind of frantic and he had a gun in his hand and he was just all over the place.
And did you get payment for the murder that night?
I believe it was the following morning. The money was in a plastic bag, like a Ziploc bag, that was inside a brown bag and then like a grocery bag over it.
And the payments from Charlie Adelson, did those include the checks that were signed by his mother from
Yes,
the Adelson
ma'am.
Institute?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Did you try to extort money out of him?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you relay to the defendant that his family was in danger if he didn't give you whatever it was you were asking for?
No, ma'am.
Katie was very effective in pushing back on this extortion theory that Charlie needed to have the jury believe was true.
While Katie Magbanua's testimony may appear to favor the prosecution, the defense is quick to question her credibility.
Well, let's talk about the testimony in your first trial. You were asked, did you get the father of your children, Mr. Garcia, to commit a murder on behalf of Mr. Charlie Adelson? Answer, no, ma'am. Do you recall saying that?
Yes, sir.
During your second trial, do you recall being asked, Charlie didn't ask you to do anything weird? Answer, no, ma'am. Like get someone to get a hitman to commit a murder of his ex-brother-in-law? No, ma'am. Those were lies, right?
Yes, I lied in my trials to save myself.
When you have a witness who is admitting that they've lied in the past, what you want to do is point out every single time somebody lies, and you don't know if they're lying then or they're lying now. All you know is they're a liar.
In your second trial, you were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus another 30 years. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
And you realize that there are only 2 ways to get out of that prison, right?
What are the 2 ways?
Well, one way was in a coffin, right?
Yes, sir.
And the other way was cooperating against Charlie Adelson, right?
No, sir. I wanted the truth to finally come out.
Now, you keep on saying that the state hasn't promised you anything, right?
Yes, sir.
But you're hoping that they're gonna help you, right?
Of course, I want to see my children again.
When he finally gets those words to come out of her mouth, she's now admitting that part of the reason she's sitting on the witness stand is to get out of jail.
Is it true that you were the mastermind behind Professor Markel's murder?
No, sir. That was Charlie.
I'm sure it was.
During the 8-day trial, the juries heard testimony from Charlie Adelson's alleged co-conspirators, along with newly deciphered FBI recordings, all of which the prosecution believe proves Adelson's guilt. Will it be enough for a jury to convict a man being tried almost 10 years after the fact, who claims to be a victim himself?
Wiretap, in the absence of any other reasonable explanation, should all lead you to one conclusion. This defendant is not a victim. He's a criminal. He's wealthy, he's smart, and he's successful. But he's a wealthy, smart, successful murderer.
The prosecution's theory of the case requires the jury to think that somebody would kill for their sister rather than for themselves. And the defense's theory is that if you mention money in front of your girlfriend, you're going to get extorted when they go out and kill your sister's ex-husband. The jury's got to pick between the two.
It's clear on Dolce Vita and on the wires what they're talking about. The details aren't about a murder. The details are about the extortion, payments. The wires show his innocence.
Going into the deliberations, we are all just very, very anxious. My concern was, look, the extortion theory muddied the waters enough for at least one juror to think, okay, there's reasonable doubt here, and so we can't convict.
On November 6, 2023, nearly a decade after the murder of Dan Markel, the jury has reached a verdict after just 3 hours of deliberation.
We, the jury, find as follows as to count 1 of the indictment, first-degree murder. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. Count 2. The defendant is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Count 3. The defendant is guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder.
Charlie, you can see the shock and surprise in his eyes. He drops his head to the counsel table, mouthing the word no. This was the first moment that air of invincibility that he'd been carrying with him his entire life had finally been punctured.
This has been a really long and terrible ordeal for all of us. It's taken a long toll on our lives, and there's a real sense of relief today.
My reaction was relief of this fear that somehow Charlie was going to literally get away with murder.
You may stand.
I would just like to say that I maintain my innocence.
Charlie Adelson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of release or parole.
And then the moment this trial is over, Donna is arrested at the airport flying to Vietnam, where there's no extradition to the U.S.
The state attorney's office gets wind Donna Adelson is having conversations in jail with Charlie about potentially fleeing the country.
We've been looking it up over and over because things change, but we're looking for places where there's no extradition.
Then a friend of the Adelsons actually informs them that they have tickets to get out of the country. And they're supplied the specific details of the flight. And Harvey and Donna Adelson are there at the airport, at the gate. And Pat Sanford steps forward and says to Donna, "You're under arrest for the murder of Dan Markell."
I don't want to give it to you. Why do I have to? Because my attorney says. Why do I have to give it to you? She's under arrest. I have to go with you. I have to go.
Donna Adelson, age 73, has pled not guilty in the murder of Dan Markell. She's being held in jail without bond, and her trial is currently set for late 2024. Defendants are never forced to take the stand, but that decision is likely the biggest one they'll ever make. For Taking the Stand, I'm Dan Abrams.
When did you separate from Professor Markell?
In the fall of 2012.
Whose decision was it to separate?
It was my decision.
Dan and Wendy were married for 6 years, and on the surface, it seemed that they had a great life. They were both doing well as law professors. They had 2 wonderful young sons. But as it turned out, there were major problems beneath the surface.
Dan thought it was the normal type of relationship struggles, that they would work through it. And he went out of town for a conference. He came home, the house was cleaned out, the kids were gone, divorce papers left on the counter. He described it as a Pearl Harbor style divorce. We've learned that Donna and Wendy had some demeaning, disparaging nicknames that they used to reference Dan.
Donna would say things like, "We're not gonna let Jibbers get the best of us," or "Jibbers hasn't defeated the Adelson family yet."
When you look at the emails that Donna Adelson was sending, it goes beyond the pale of any normalcy or reason.
She suggests that Wendy dress the kids up in Hitler Youth uniforms and take pictures of them because Dan was Jewish and his Jewish faith was very important to him.
Donna recognized that that was a weak point for Dan. So she was willing to exploit that, Dan's faith, as a means to try to achieve the end that she wanted, which was getting the children.
This motion to cut off Donna Adelson's visitation unsupervised with the boys was still pending at the time of the murder.
On top of this, Dan Markel and his lawyer were also about to file another important motion.
The day that Dan was murdered, I had advised Wendy's attorney that we were going to file something that was going to demonstrate to the court that Wendy had committed a fraud in her financial disclosures. I had a legitimate belief that it would potentially jeopardize Wendy's law license. I mean, we were going to file them before 5 o'clock that day. No ifs, ands, or buts. I told Dan that I was going to call him at 10 Central, 11 Eastern. I called him, I believe, at 11:18. He didn't answer. I didn't know he had been murdered about 20 minutes prior.
The prosecution says this theory just doesn't add up and looks to prove it by focusing on his financial interactions with Katie Magbanua.
Did you offer to buy Catherine Magbanua and her mom a cruise?
Yes, I offered, but she never took me up on it.
Did you pay for a meal service for Catherine Magbanua?
Yeah, I did.
Did you pay for car repairs for her?
Yeah.
Did you offer that she could use your Range Rover anytime?
Sure.
Are these gifts what it took to secure her silence for so long?
No, absolutely not. I was never trying to get her silence.
What's the purpose of keeping Katie happy? Was she gonna sick the Latin Kings on you if you made her unhappy?
I thought that she wasn't part of it and she was protecting me.
Can we agree in general that it's important to maintain positive feelings between co-conspirators?
I'm not a co-conspirator with her.